Tata has completely monopolized salt in India with a 40% share in the branded edible salt market. And it is 4 times larger than its nearest competitor, Unilever, which was literally unable to compete and sold its business altogether. I spent several days trying to find out Tata Salt's secret to domination. And that story actually began after independence. Back then, the salt market in India was severely fragmented and disorganized. It was typically produced by small manufacturers in unhygienic conditions and sold loose without any packaging. So a majority of the Indian population was consuming crude salt that was often contaminated. But the problem did not end there. India at that time was also battling a severe iodine deficiency. Iodine is essential for our bodies to create thyroid hormones, which are crucial for growth, development, and metabolism. And typically, we get our iodine from the foods in our diet, depending on the iodine content of the soil in which it is grown. And this was where India faced a severe problem. Iodine is naturally present in seawater in various forms, so the soil in coastal areas is rich in iodine. On the other hand, hilly and inland areas have a significant shortage of iodine in soil, because they experience heavy rainfall that drains iodine with it, with no seawater to replenish it. And many of the top food producing states in India are in the northern and northeastern region. The soil in this region has poor iodine content, so the crops grown in these areas are usually iodine deficient. As a result, India was battling iodine deficiency disorders or IDD, such as goiter. In fact, we had vast areas known as goiter belts, where the prevalence of goiter, a common IDD, was as high as 50 to 70% of the population. And children were at an even greater risk for issues like mental retardation and growth and developmental abnormalities. This was when Tata Chemicals, a part of the Tata Group, decided to change the salt landscape of India forever. As the name suggests, Tata Chemicals specialized in making chemicals, fertilizers, and even cement. And they had all the infrastructure in place that was needed to start producing salt. And to invade this market, Tata Chemicals used a two-pronged innovation approach. Firstly, they started adding iodine to their salt to address the deficiency in our country. Not only was this a strategic move that would help them expand into a new segment, but it aimed at improving the health of iodine-starved Indians, which was in line with the social ethos of Tata, a brand long known for its care for India and Indians. And secondly, Tata Chemicals pioneered a new salt production method altogether, the vacuum evaporation technique. Back then, salt was primarily produced through solar evaporation. Seawater is the largest natural source of salt. In solar evaporation, seawater is collected in large, shallow ponds known as salt pans, and then left to evaporate under the sun, finally leaving behind salt crystals. Because this method was extremely cheap and simple, it had been in use for centuries. But this model had several drawbacks. The biggest limitation was a heavy dependence on weather, because it needed strong sunlight and low humidity for efficient evaporation. Secondly, it also required large areas of land to set up these salt pans, and it also required a lot of time for the water to evaporate on its own, taking several months to produce a single batch. But most importantly, it meant that the salt was inconsistent in quality and extremely unhygienic, leaving it to dry out in the open for months, exposed it to contaminants such as dust, debris, and even bird droppings. And since it was not exactly an efficient process, it could affect the quality by leaving behind impurities such as calcium and magnesium. This was when Tata Chemicals brought in the revolutionary technique of vacuum evaporation. In this process, you take a container with salt water and then artificially create a vacuum in that container. In a vacuum container, the pressure is low. And in low pressure conditions, water boils at a much lower temperature than the usual 100 degrees Celsius. So less energy is required to boil it. As this vacuum container with salt water is boiled, water evaporates as steam and salt is left behind as crystals. This salt is then further processed, where it is sieved to sort by crystal size and necessary additives like iodine are added. The end result is a salt that is leaps and bounds better than solar evaporated salt. It has consistent crystals, goodness of iodine, no impurities, and is untouched by hand, directly sealed into safe packaging. It is also energy efficient and cheap to manufacture. And suddenly, Tata Salt became the healthiest and most hygienic option in the market. So while existing players played on the price and utility of the salt, Tata was the first one to introduce the health perspective to this commodity. And suddenly, you were not just buying a basic amenity, but an ingredient essential to your health. If you have made it this far, please subscribe to my channel. and I promise that you will find value in my content. Moving on. Now this salt needed to be sold. Salt has always had a special place in our country. The Dandi March, one of the most memorable and iconic events of our centuries-long independence struggle, actually had salt at the center of attention. The British had imposed a heavy tax on salt and monopolized its production, making it unaffordable for the common man. And Gandhiji had walked for 387 kilometers to Dandi with thousands of people, where he produced salt from the sea and defied the British. Tata cleverly capitalized on this historical sentiment by tying their salt to the idea of national pride and self-sufficiency. They came up with their iconic tagline, Tata Namak, Desh Ka Namak, with several marketing campaigns with the word Desh, emphasizing this nationalist identity like Desh ki sehat, Desh ka namak, and Maine Desh ka namak khaya hai, featuring Olympic medal winner Mary Kom. And note here that while other companies used the word salt for their product, Tata subtly replaced this word with namak. Simply by changing the word from salt to namak, Tata established a personal connection with the common man, who suddenly felt more familiar with Tata Namak than any other brand. Their marketing campaigns focused on the awareness of iodine deficiency diseases and how Tata Salt could help prevent them. But Tata's genius did not end there. See, no matter how superior your product is to your competitors or how well you market your brand, if it does not reach the shelves of the stores where the end customer is shopping, everything is a waste. For example, even if Harpic creates a revolutionary toilet cleaner that works better than acid or phenyl and market it well enough to make customers go to the store and ask for Harpic instead of acid, if the store does not keep Harpic on its shelves but some other generic toilet cleaner that was successful in reaching that store, Harpic would have essentially paid all the marketing money to help that competitor get new customers. So being where your customer is extremely crucial from a sales perspective. And this is much more difficult than it sounds. We often tend to underestimate how big India is from a geographic perspective. And reaching those hundreds of tier 3 and tier 4 cities and thousands of villages was crucial for Tata to establish a monopoly in salt. And Tata tackled this challenge head on, employing an incredibly vast distribution network to ensure their product was available throughout India. Being a part of the mighty Tata Group, they were able to leverage their existing distribution infrastructure and relationships, a unique advantage that no other competitor had. And this was also where the concept of shelf space profitability kicked in to help them. See, each retailer or shop owner, no matter how big or small, has a fixed shelf space and storage space in his store. And to maximize his returns on real estate, he needs to maximize the revenue from each square foot of this shelf space. Salt is a product with an extremely low shelf space profitability. 1 kg of Tata Salt occupies a lot of space on the shelves but has a very low profit per unit, selling for only about 25 rupees. And not just this, but salt also has a low product turnover, which means how quickly a product is sold and replaced over a period of time. A product that sells very quickly, like bread, can lead to greater revenue over time even if the individual profit margin per item is low. The average Indian consumes about 10 grams of salt every day. And India's average household size was 4.4 people in 2021. So even if we consider that the entire salt intake of every single person is from homemade food, it means that the average Indian household consumes about 44 grams of salt every day. This means that a 1 kg packet of salt would last for at least 3 weeks in a house. And you would need less than 18 packets of salt every single year, which is less than Rs 450 per year. And this is an overestimation. Go and ask your mom how much salt your house consumes in a year, and you will get the idea. So salt has one of the lowest turnover rates of all commodities. And since it occupies so much space, it also has one of the lowest shelf space profitability. As a result, the retailer is forced to stock just one brand of salt instead of multiple brands. Because whether he stocks one brand or multiple brands, it would not have much of an impact on his revenue. Instead of stocking a second brand of salt, he can use that shelf space for products that have a higher turnover and profitability. And moreover, managing fewer brands simplifies inventory control for him. It reduces the time and costs of handling multiple suppliers and tracking different inventories. So if the customers are asking for Tata Salt, or even if they are not asking for it but are happy with taking Tata Salt, it makes no sense for the retailer to stock any other brand, establishing a virtual monopoly for Tata. The result is that Tata Salt is currently available in more than 19 lakh retail outlets in India, with 35% of its sales happening in rural markets. And this is how, with a combination of the perfect product, marketing, and distribution, the three pillars of sales, Tata Salt managed to become the salt of India. I hope you liked this video. Follow me on LinkedIn. The link is in the description below. Until I see you in the next one, goodbye.